Hey everybody, welcome back to another MSP Live Chat from Ninja One. I am Jonathan Crow, Director of Content Community at Ninja One. I've got with me my fearless co-host, as always, Tom Watson, our Channel Chief Advisor. Hey, Tom.
Great to be here, Jonathan.
Absolutely. And our super special guest, Marnie Stockman, CEO of Lifecycle Insights. Marnie, so great to see you.
Oh, I'm excited to be here in a much less treacherous situation than our previous experiences.
Oh man, well you're teeing it up. You're teeing it up. I love it. So as Marnie points out, let's go ahead and just skip right to this. For those of you, we see familiar faces here in the chat already. Hey Mikey from Wales, thanks for taking time out of your evening, sir. Kelvin, our Microsoft MVP scripting expert. Check out the CTF that he's hosting that's going on right now. But as you know, if you've been following Ninja and our friends and our events, Marnie and I, this is not our first rodeo together. We've got some past experience, including being park tour guides, being galactic commentators. Now, I will say that our job experiences here, we are like the 1 day each for these. I think we're job hoppers. I don't think that this is good. Like recruiters.
I did notice. Those did not make my LinkedIn profile.
Yeah, I mean, there's still time to update. We do a lot of virtual events. There's our MSP Live Chats. There's things we've done, like last month we did our IT Love Fest for Valentine's Day. That was a great event where we talked about open source tools. And last year, yeah, we had some really awesome fun events that were Star Wars and Jurassic Park themed. I dropped some links in here and inside this doc that you can check out. And while I'm thinking about that, let me go ahead and give you, everyone here on the line, our agenda doc. Now, for those of you who this is your first live chat, you're not really familiar with how we roll here with our virtual events. Let me give you a little bit more context. So these are meant to be very conversational, very interactive. Yes, we've got Marnie here. She is an expert and the perfect person to talk about customer success. We're going to get a little bit into why that is. And so definitely make use of your time with her to ask questions. But it's also your time to chat with each other, of course. And if you've got anyone here on the call, you know, if customer success is something that you're actively trying out, that you're hiring for, that you've already got up and running, that you're testing out, we want to hear from you too. So definitely feel free to raise your hand to jump in the chat. And if you're brave and willing, we can even bring you on screen.
With the fair warning that we have had dinosaurs attack on screen before. So.
I mean, we can't vouch for anything. It's a crazy world we live in, obviously. But we'll try to keep you safe and having fun here. So as part of our live chat series, we want to make sure that these are always practical, that you're leaving with good insights, that you're learning stuff, and that you also have a ton of resources. And so that's why I dropped that link to the doc in the chat. It's got, as you'll see, you can skip ahead to kind of see what we're going to be talking about, and you'll get links to everything that we're going to be discussing here today. And as other links come up, because without fail, all the smart, lovely people here in the chat, the real smart folks, aside from me, always drop in helpful links into the chat. And so we'll be adding to this doc, and you'll get access to it once the chat's over. So that's all and then also you'll get access to a recording. So I think that's kind of our housekeeping. Marnie, I want to kick it over to you to let you introduce yourself. Obviously, I let everyone know that you're a CEO at Lifecycle Insights. Definitely want to hear, give some more context there, but also tell us, why are you talking about customer success? Because, well, it's in your background. I'd love to hear more about that.
Yeah, it is. So somebody just at Exchange this week said, so you said you were a high school math teacher and now you're a CEO of a software company with customer success as a focus, right? How did that come to be? To which I say, first, I believe all teachers are good at customer success and sales and marketing, because if you're going to pitch pre-calculus to 16-year-olds, you better bring some game, right? You better be able to sell it because otherwise they're not buying. And then in the world of customer success, I always consider customer success an English to English translator. And that's what teachers do, right? They translate from textbook to student. And in this world, customer success is translating technology to business and business to technology. So that's how I started in the world. And then ended up, when I was supervisor and accountability coordinator for a school district, I was using a SaaS product around assessments. and ended up presenting in front of the owner of the company, who said, you need to come run customer success for us. And what he really was interested in is that I understood the business side, which in that case was the world of education, and I could connect to the technology well. So that whole, English to English translator piece. And then I landed through 4 acquisitions and decided that I'd like to have that not happen to me without any kind of control. So the developers and I decided we should go look for a problem to solve. And I ran into Alex Farling, who is now one of my co-founders, at a volleyball game. We'd played for 20 years. I knew him as an IT guy and didn't know much more. And he knew I was in ed tech, and that was it. And I said, we're looking for a problem to solve. And he said, QBRs, right? Like I just cobbled together from PSAs and RMMs and blah, blah, blah. Like he said all these 3-letter acronyms that I didn't know what they were at the time. And said, can you solve that problem? So we came from data analytics and worked to solve that problem. But Tom and I were talking earlier, at the same time when I was in the SaaS company, the ed tech company, Gainsight, Totango, et cetera, started coming out with customer success platforms and tracking metrics toward churn and really how to mature your customer success. You're looking at metrics around the human side of the house as opposed to the technical side of the house, and really makes an impact on business, which we'll talk about in a second. But that's kind of what led us to this next step, is there was nothing like that on the market for MSPs. Everything was very software related, not business oriented. So that's how we landed here.
Yeah, thank you so much for that context. And let's just say the other important part. Why are you here? Well, you're the expert who, in fact, wrote the book on customer success, right? For MSPs. Everybody, we're going to drop a link to this book. Obviously, it's a great read. It'll take you about, a couple hours to go through. And it's the perfect mix of, like high level stuff, but super practical things. And so we're going to go over some of the concepts that Marnie outlined here very helpfully. And you'll get a kind of a taste of it, but definitely check out the book. It's available on Amazon, $5. It's
I was like, it is a whopping $4.99. So
yeah, totally. But so very much worth it. So before we get into it, I think the other thing is, okay, so now thank you, Marnie, for giving the context there. I think for a lot of folks maybe on the line here, customer success, it's one of those things, like going back to my background, I worked for, before Ninja, I worked for an endpoint security company, and prior to that for a VC firm that was working with SaaS companies. And customer success, when I was at the VC firm, was definitely becoming kind of its own category, right? And people were talking about the need for it, what roles you should hire for, all that stuff. And that was about 6 years ago. And it definitely hasn't flowed down into the channel as much. I think when maybe a lot of people on the line, correct me if I'm wrong, but like when you hear customer success, maybe you're thinking about, are we talking about account management? Yeah. What's the difference between, is it just good, having good service, good support? And that's something that I think you did a really good job of clarifying in the book. And I'll just bring over Jim from the office to help us kind of lay out what you're talking about there. You want to speak to this?
I definitely do. It's my first. It combines my 2 passions, right? Customer success with some math equations. So of course, let's chat. So I say CS equals CX plus CO, right? Which I actually grabbed off of Gainsight, who is an industry leader in success. And so your customer success is based on 2 things: the experience, which is where your support desk absolutely comes into play. Any notifications, right? Like, what does it look like? All of the websites that say we have the friendliest techs in the world, that's all part of the experience, right? Like, it's a happy place to work with you. But it's also the outcomes you're delivering for the clients. And that's the differentiator, right? The title of this is Customer Success is a Competition Killer. A lot of pieces in today's MSP can be commoditized, right? And it's a tech stack, but it's the human stack, the human side of the house that makes the business owner, it builds the relationship, makes them sticky with you. And really you become part of that C-suite, part of the strategic planning team when you're focused on their goals and how your technology can help support their goals. So that's, big fan of that equation.
Yeah. Tom, prior when we were on our, in the green room here, this came up with you and you had some interesting thoughts about kind of when you were operating and how you've seen this evolve too. But I know the commoditization that's going on now, and the struggle to really differentiate is something that you talk about a lot.
Yeah, absolutely, Jonathan. I kind of had my MSP in what I would call kind of the heydays of MSPs, which is like 2000 to 2015. And we were just like in the late 2000s, we were just trying to figure out this whole subscription model and getting people to sign up for that and deliver services. And then with this shift to the commoditization you talked about, where we're leveraging the services of the companies like Microsoft and all of these SaaS companies, it's become much more, you have to deliver these products. You've got to make sure the clients can use them. You got to make sure they're getting something out of them. You become this kind of customer service organization that like envelops your clients, and you have to ensure that they are successful, and that breeds into your success. And as we've talked about, I know Marnie talks about in her book, got Michael O'Toole talking about in here, we are fundamentally service companies, and we are customer support and customer service companies more than anything else. And that shift is brought about that we've got to rethink how we do our business, not just around the tech that us as MSP owners are really accustomed to, but how do we make this like an all-encompassing experience for the client that's positive and makes them more profitable and leads to our profits.
Yeah, thanks for that, Tom. And I just dropped a poll here, everybody. Just ask the question. I mean, I'm kind of interested, who has staff that's dedicated to this? And this is something we're going to touch on because, depending on your size and where you're at, it may be just you right now. It may be you and one tech. I mean, you may be wearing that hat. I guess one point that always gets brought up when we're talking about size and how much staff people has, it's this is one of those roles, I get a sense of, Marnie, that even if you don't have someone addressing it, it doesn't mean the role goes away. It just means no one's doing it.
Which is the danger. It's interesting because we have talked to folks that say, I don't know if this will save me anytime, but we're not doing it at all. So it's probably going to save me clients, right? Like this is work I have to do. And there's certainly, there's customer success and there's customer success, to which I would say, if you don't think you're doing anything, we should take some time to chat through that because you probably are doing something, right? Like it's not complete panic, but there are also incremental bite-sized pieces you can do to move that along the way. And of course, the very first thing I'm going to say, and we have many folks come to us and say this, like I'm kind of doing business reviews ad hoc. I don't meet with my clients regularly because we have everything automated. And now I'm really fearful that another MSP is going to come in and have that strategic conversation with the business owners that frankly I could have, but just haven't done. And so as a first step, like how are you keeping the communication lines open with your clients so that they know you could deliver this strategic conversation with them, et cetera. So I think that's a place to start, but absolutely there are bite-sized pieces folks can do along the way. In the book, I talk about the first thing you should do is segment your client base into who gets a quarterly business review, who gets an annual one, because not everybody needs or wants the same thing. So don't feel like this overwhelming panic of like crushing, I've got to do 457 new things tomorrow. Let's take a minute, shake it out, decide who deserves what sort of interaction at what cadence, and then let's see what that looks like.
Yeah, I mean, you do such a great job in the book. I'm going to keep on repeating myself over and over at this, but you really do. I mean, do a great job helping people get, how do we take first steps? And I really like the way we're going to get into a little bit more of how you went through the segmentation process. You've got a really cool kind of walkthrough for doing that, which I thought was great. But let's go back really quickly to kind of further delineating that line between just support and what customer success. Like, what are we actually talking about here? Because we're already mentioning, okay, QBR is kind of the obvious one that people jump to. Yep. But is it more than that? And I mean, what I thought reading the book, you listed out kind of these pillars of good success, and the first is that it's the understanding of your customers' business, right? And so I think it ties into that goal that we're always talking about, and I think everybody gets in theory and is on board with, but it's that this can't just be about the tech. It's got to be about tying to business outcomes. And
it ties exactly to what Tom said, right? In 2000 to 2015, how did the world of MSPs change, right? Why did business reviews even become a thing? It is because it went from the world where people didn't know how to patch their own devices to you patching for them and having to show them that you patch them, or we stop this many spam emails, or we close this many tickets, right? Whatever tech pieces you were doing, to now, like I get the update every morning. I'm well aware when I need to patch my device, right? Like, so now it's less about all of these technical things that they just assume is happening with or without you, frankly, right? To what is the business goal that we're trying to achieve, right? So there's been this maturity in the conversation because the tech has increased as well. So I think that's why the customers need to feel like you understand their business, because they expect sort of the automation to happen anyway.
Yeah, I think we're going to get into another piece of this where it's how to avoid being blindsided. You have a great section of the book where you're talking about sharing some experiences where people have that call where out of the blue a customer's moving on from them, and they had no indication why. But going back to this point, I highlighted here in this phrase like processes to ensure the customer feels heard, because I think that's important. It's not just like not processes that you're doing to actually like hear the customer. It's making sure that they have the feels, right?
Yeah, 100%.
Yeah, and so it's more. I think what I would imagine some frustrations in some points of customers having a perception going on in their head that you're not fully clear or aware of. And in your mind, as an MSP, you're kind of like, well, we're doing all the things. They should be happy. But the reality is maybe they're not seeing it that way. Or to your point, they're not seeing everything that you're actually doing.
So it's interesting. I saw a stat the other day, and this is from 2020, but it was a Gartner poll that said businesses will expect to operate 85% of the time through technology, right? Non-face-to-face, right? So automation happens, get tickets, get notifications, have a portal, whatever that experience is. But the other 15% with what they consider their enterprise support team, right? Whether it's a CRM type of application, their managed service provider, whatever, they expect that to be relationship building. And that is really the feels that you mentioned, right? People say the words trusted advisor, they typically roll their eye, right? Strategic advisor, like everybody's saying that, but nobody's doing anything about it. But that's that extra 15% that really sets you apart. And that because there are doctors' offices where like you love the doctor because the experience is so good. That there are other places that are not just in the technology world where the relationship is as important as the outcome. And that's really a good definition, I think, for customer success.
Well, there you go. Let's go back to this chart or get into this chart for a second. So the other thing is like, what it is, like what it isn't, I think is just important because it's not just the reactive support. I think that the big point that you hammer on a lot is you're really just trying to find ways to be proactive. And why you're doing that is so you can learn ahead of time, where are we at with this customer? Let's gauge the temperature. And because you want to be able to find out, like, are we in trouble or are they at risk? If they are, we want to be able to act before they're actually out the door.
Sorry, go ahead.
No, after you.
So a very simple first step would be to, when I ran the software side of it in the EdTech space, I would draw the circle of life, so summer, fall, winter, spring, and would say, when do I need my people to be happiest, right? So if this is when they're, if January is when they're going to renew my contract, what happened in December to make sure customer success was at their highest point, right? Because I'm trying to reduce churn, increase happiness, gain referrals. So what can I do even cyclically? Are there things at end of fiscal year where I know I could be at jeopardy for losing a client or for making a raving fan and getting new referrals? So let's take a look at the calendar and see, are there cycles in my clients' businesses that may impact the way I can work with them and show them I understand their business? And that's an interesting first step. It takes 20 minutes to kind of just think through that. But you might come up with one new idea of maybe a marketing, tactic, an email that you could send out to show, I get you. This is where you are right now, and here's how I can help.
So, who's doing this? Like, ideally, when you've been talking, you've obviously through Lifecycle, you talk with MSPs all the time.
Yep.
Through putting the book together. I think the way you kind of outline in the book is you obviously give people direction if they're just trying to get started and do something. But then you do go far enough to where you're laying out kind of a clear plan for for this to be a full-time job, a full-time like individual dedicated position.
Absolutely.
And certainly we see that within software companies. I mean, with Ninja, you know, there's account managers, but other software companies, there's whole customer success teams. But what are you seeing with MSPs, like on the ground? Like, are you seeing that there's a lot of people actively doing these things, or it's just kind of one of the things that many things that an owner does?
So it usually starts as one of the many things the owner does. And then the interesting part is they'll start to feel the stress of I don't scale. If I am the only one with all of the relationships, then I don't ever get to really go on vacation, right? Because I always have to be there just in case Tom calls because he's our best client. And if he gets angry, I have to be the one to answer that, right? Like, so it's a scary jump that first time because you're putting the life of your customer into the hands of someone else. I remember when I was first a customer success manager, we got 2 huge clients at the same time. So they were over $1 million deal a year. And I was brand new. And there was the other account. And so they gave me this one and they dealt with that one. And once a week, the owner on Fridays at 5:30, he would call me and be like, oh my gosh, okay, how's it going? And, you know, he'd be in a panic because he just like a good luck little trooper and sent me on my way to figure out how to be customer success manager for this new client. But because of that anxiety, it is actually what helped me build a program for him so that we had metrics. So we did not have to in a panic. It happened Fridays at 5:30. And every time he was on a plane, he would finally remember I existed and would then panic about how do I find out how my clients are doing? So we started tracking metrics so he could see in red, yellow, green, like, oh, they're happy, right? I see their CSAT scores. Marnie's put in a health check this week. You know, we know that their system's been up the whole time. So we started with way too many metrics for the record. We finally got it down to 5 that made sense. And he could see like, all right, there it is. So that was an interesting piece when the owner has to hand that off. So then what does it look like? Some folks hire. The first thing we did was hire sort of a junior account manager. So they weren't going to own the whole, I'll call it VCIO relationship. So there's kind of a differentiator. The owner's still going to be the one to go in and deliver the business review, the true strategic conversation. But there's an account manager that can do some of the tactical pieces. You know, they can, when they understand best practices, they can fill out some of a risk assessment, right? They can track asset lifecycle management. They can look at tickets and aggregate all of that information and start to hand that information to the owner who can still then have the relationship, but they also start building a relationship of their own. It's a good way to kind of grow your own VCIO if you don't have somebody right out of the gate that really is a VCIO. And then we start to see the differentiation. So we see people hire a CSM or a TAM, whatever you want to call that role. And then we see a VCIO and account managers that can kind of work in conjunction. One of our partners who, and we'll happily give away his SOP. So if anybody wants to email me for it, he's more than happy to let us.
Nice.
We're allowed, it's the one in the book, right? We're allowed to share that out. But he has an intern and another member of his team that prep all the things for business review. He gets it 15 minutes beforehand, looks through it, makes the recommendations 15 minutes afterwards. So he's tied his entire process for him down to an hour and a half because he's got a team in place, you know, that divvies up the work.
Nice. Yeah, Tom, I want to get your thoughts. Kind of, I know that obviously you're talking with MSPs all the time too. Kind of where are you seeing things? How are you hearing things? And how, like, you know, let's go to your favorite question. If you were building things out now, today, you know, how would you be approaching some of this stuff?
Well, I can also talk about, like, in terms of that, because I think I went through this too. So we all know it's an evolution to MSP. You start on your own, you're doing it out of your house or your basement, something like that. And then you hire some people, you often get office space, you get your tools in place. And then the business gets to a point where you realize you need to exit different parts of it. And you first kind of exit the tech. Now you're on the business side, but then you're trying to grow the business and you've got all of these customer service issues over here and all these things need to be done. And you've got to bring people in to do that piece. And so knowing when it's time to let go and bring someone in who's really good on front facing with the clients, that can handle these evaluations, that's able to hear, from the customers in terms of what they need and what they want, and exit yourself from that and allow that process to be managed by someone, and have someone. I think one of the most important things, Marty, what I see is you need to have someone in your company who is responsible for customer success. That needs to be done by committee. There's got to be someone who's in charge of that and hearing them, and they bring that to you for decisions. And then you hand that off, and they're handling the metrics of it, and you're scoring these things, and you're making sure that what they have to say is involved in your process.
Yeah, great point. And it sounds like, Marty, what you're talking about too. I mean, the key here is, especially if you're bringing in someone junior, it's process, right?
Absolutely. Like everything else. I say in the book, like, you have people, process, and product for all of your technology stack. Why don't you have that for your human stack, the human element of your business? Yeah,
well, let's get into that a little bit, and then I want to get into the actual metrics that you've highlighted, and kind of how you're and what a day-to-day, like, what the actual jobs to be done are basically for this role. But you laid this out, like, the stack. Like you mentioned, this doesn't just apply to customer success, which is the cool thing. It applies to a lot of things. In fact, it sent me off in the security direction. But yeah, I mean, I think just you want to walk through this chart, because I thought this was a really interesting way to really represent this.
I would love to. So if you look at the overlap of the chart, right, the goal is to have people, process, and product in place. So if you look at the overlaps that are not included in that middle, right, if you have people and process, then you're missing product. That's the upper left-hand side. What does that look or feel like? Low achievement, no accountability, no results. So if that's what your company feels like right now, you may be at the point where you're ready for a product so that you can track metrics. If you have process and product in place, no people, this feels very robotic, low movement, low innovation, right? So if you just do everything through a portal and a help desk ticket, you are definitely in jeopardy. Nobody's got a relationship, right? And then the last one is, if you have people and product but no process, it feels chaos, because you're just throwing things at the wall. You're probably collecting data, not even looking at it. So that's kind of what, if it feels like any one of those things, you should take a look at the missing element to improve where you are.
Yeah, no, I mean, it's such a great way of thinking about it. And like I said, I'm sure people on the call here are thinking in ways that this applies to not just customer success.
Yeah, I was going to say not just customer success.
Yeah, this applies to everything.
Like how the dishes get washed in your house. You could do the same process for this.
Well, let's go down to this. So, like, this is also, it got me kind of thinking. This takes things into a slightly different direction. But when you're thinking about, like, having someone own this and what they're actually doing, and if that person is you and you're the owner, how you're fitting this in. Marnie, back towards the top of the call, you mentioned segmenting your audience, and based on who's actually wanting to have more regular touch-ins, or check-ins, and then also you got to keep in mind your own profitability, right? Like, who kind of warrants it from just the amount of MRR they're bringing in and everything. And it got me thinking about the cybersecurity, or the cyber defense matrix. If folks haven't seen this, it's a great doc that a lot of people, Huntress has talked about this. I think this was prominent in Andrew Morgan in the cyber call. This has come up a bunch. And this is like their way of making really the point that, like, as you go into, when you think about security, you're obviously trying to automate a lot. And you're trying to use your tools, your AV and everything. And that can really help you with some of the, like, to the left of boom, like, the prevention side of the house. Yeah. But then once you're talking about detection and response, these are more people. You're going to need expert people who are actually monitoring and able to respond. You're going to need some expertise and actual human touches there. And that kind of, like, mapped for me over into what we're talking about here, less in terms of, like, specific aspects of customer success, although that's maybe another part of it too. But more of, like, mapping it to your customer segments. And you've got your own charts in the book that are great, the way that you kind of map things out, and you determine, okay, who actually warrants and needs higher touches. But I thought this was kind of like an interesting thing too. Like, your process is going to go across the board, but obviously, like, what can you automate by using a tool? And we'll talk about tools. So obviously, Lifecycle provides great tools. There's even more of there's also the CSAT collection tools.
Oh, absolutely, which is a part of it. Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. So there's tooling that you can do that truly like maintain, get feedback and touch points and all that, and you're automating a lot of it. But then obviously for your higher end clients, especially the ones who really need it, who have complexity, and you need and maybe this changes by the life cycle of the customer too. You know, early on versus later once you've got them onboarded and everything. Sure. But I just thought it was kind of an interesting way to think about this, like. Be pragmatic about it, you know, and be methodical about it. Come up with a system where you're not trying to do the same thing for everybody, which is a big point in your book. Yeah, you're breaking it down.
Well, and I think, you know, I worked in a small school district, and then I ran customer success for a huge one. And when I ended up firing a CSM because he wanted to meet with me every single week, it's like I have no time. Like this is 1/18 of my job responsibility. I have no time to talk with my software vendor, right? Yeah. Versus when I ran the $1.7 million contract for a huge school system, they had a dedicated person for our product. Guess what? They wanted to meet with me weekly. And guess what? For $1.7 million, they got to, right? Yeah. So it was, but that small school system still had the same needs, right? So your small businesses, just because they don't want to meet with you quarterly, doesn't mean they don't have some needs. So what can you automate? How can you, I always call it remarketing, and I don't mean retargeting prospects. I mean, how can you communicate and show value of what you're delivering to your current clients, right? Automated pieces, those types of things are critical for those small ones. And then for the large, high complexity, high compliance, right? Those types of clients are going to need more human interaction. And what I love about the chart that you have is the downward slant of like, there's a cross of automation and people. Both are involved. But there's got to be a heavier emphasis. When it takes a human to be strategic, use a human. Stop trying to automate something that needs to be strategic, you know?
Yeah, absolutely. And I mean, this probably goes to like to the, you know, Tom and Mikey brought up too, the handing off relationships as an owner. Like there's probably the ones that you hang on to for a little bit longer, right? Because
absolutely.
Yeah.
Your top referral, you know?
Mm-hmm. Exactly. Okay, so let's we're about halfway through time here. I want to make sure we got some really a lot of other good stuff to talk about here. Let's talk about specific activities. And you mentioned something. You just made me think of something where you mentioned firing your CSM. You know, we actually do hear this a lot. Like clients finding good reasons to contact clients.
Yes.
Right. Like. Yes. Any suggestions there? And actually, before you answer that, let's couch it in something. You did a great job. Let's skip by this and come back to that in a little bit. That's our little laugh at Alex. Let's get into what the day-to-day actually looks like. Sorry, I'm just going around through here. A day in the life. Okay, here we go. You mentioned some of the kind of higher end goals for the customer success function. You're trying to identify and address priority at-risk accounts because you don't want to be blindsided.
Yep.
That's okay. Now we can go to a little joke here. Blindsided. You also
let's talk about what that feels like for an MSP.
Okay. Yeah,
like,
let's do it.
Like let's do what does blindside look like? It looks like when you think everything's going fine, you know the technology's working fine, right? Like you've seen all the logs, you haven't had to call the customer and say, looks like you're down or whatever. And then they call you and say, I'm leaving you for another MSP, right? And you either hear one of two things. One is I found a lower price. So that was a struggle right out of the gate because it was not value-based, it was cost-based. So read commoditization is the problem. Mm-hmm. Or what I've been hearing more frequently, and folks are really trying to deflect this, is that someone came in and showed them how they could be more strategic than their existing MSP. And so they're getting blindsided, not because anything was wrong with the technology, but because it's one of those, Alex always says, if everything's broken, why am I paying you? If everything's working, why am I paying you, right? So that everything's working can be just as big a threat because silence is deadly. So how can you have communication so that they understand the value you're bringing to them without being annoying and like, oh, I just wanted to call and check in and tell you that we've patched your devices 72 times and you didn't get any phishing emails that, you know, you didn't get breached once this month, right? That's not what they want to hear either. So what can you do to bring value to them, to remind them of your relationship and really what you're bringing to the company?
And so for that, any suggestions there? I mean, maybe this goes back to a really key point that you make about what customer success is all about and why it's a different topic than just providing good support. It goes back to knowing your customers and their business, what they actually value as in terms of their own success metrics.
Yep.
And what's going on in their own business, right? And so it's less. I mean, because when we think about QBRs, a lot of times I think we think of it's the MSP, like it's you going and showing why they're paying you. It's like you showing your own performance metrics. You're not really tying it to, well,
their business outcomes.
Right, their business outcomes.
Oh, I like it. Alex just pops in and we blindsided Alex and he blindsided us right back. So well played, Alex. So some of that is, we recommend sending an agenda out 2 weeks in advance. So one, this will keep you from the blind side yourself, because if when you send out this collaborative agenda 2 weeks in advance, they send back ticket 1539, like I'm hot, I'm angry, it's broken, people are throwing things in my office, you should stop immediately and fix that issue for them. You should call them and say, I'm not going to wait 2 weeks to solve this problem for you, right? Like we want to deal with this right now. You'll do two things. First, they'll realize they're important. They got a call from you, builds that relationship. Second, customer satisfaction will be much higher when you go to have that conversation. And you know how like when you're really stressed about something, you can't think of anything else until that is off of your mind. That's what ticket 1539 was causing them, right? That kind of problem. So, and then the next piece in the agenda is about their business. Spend as much time as they want having them answer the following questions. What's new in your business? Mm-hmm. What goals do you have in your business coming up? Are you growing? Are you shrinking? Are you hiring, right? Like, what are you doing manually? Because guess what? I'm really good at technology. We may have some ways to make that easy for you, right? What are the 3 things you have a human doing that you wish you didn't have to spend a human on, right? All of those things can help. Those are the things you can think about in how to be proactive, right? So you mentioned the day in the life, like how do you think about instead of just reacting to things? And I always talk about like spinning plates and putting out fires. So I think there are a couple things. One, look at your own company and set some priorities. You will very much feel like you're putting lids on pots, to make another analogy along that same thing, if it's constantly reacting to like, they need MFA turned on and they need a password policy and they needed this and they needed that. So we have a lot of folks that are kind of grouping that and saying, April is MFA month. Like everybody you get MFA and you get MFA and you get an MFA, right? So if you can bulk do that work, that's a step toward automation, right? Mm-hmm. So that's one way to get everybody what they need. And think about the cycle of work that you want to do it bulks, it makes sense, it's more profitable that way. And then look at, again, the cycle of the year. So what problems happen at the end of the year, or maybe great things that happen at the end of the year, like end of year spend down. If you think there's going to be more money at the end of the year, what should you do right before the end of the year then, right? Maybe meet with them about projects that they want to have done. And so that's kind of that's you looking inward. But in the you looking outward, look at their business cycle and what type of work are they doing in the spring, in the winter, in the fall? And are there ways that you can help address their particular need? Especially if you have a vertical, like chat with all of your dentist's office and say, what is the cycle for this office? Or maybe it comes with referral, like their renewal period. But to really chart out conversations they want to have and when, gives customer success managers something meaningful to talk about instead of just like, I just want to check in. Is it baseball season for your son yet? Like, I can't wait to hear how he's doing. Is he still playing second base? Right? Like, that's nice, but very busy people would really rather have that as a message about their business. You said you were planning on hiring 3 more folks this month. Did we get there? Right? Do you have some onboarding needs we can help with? That type of thing.
Oh man, that's great. Tom, I'm going to take us in a different direction, but I want to give you a chance to respond. Anything you want to say about that from what Marnie was saying?
Not really. I think she pretty well summed it up. I mean, I'm in total agreement.
Yeah, well, let's go to flags then. I mean, those are I think, first of all, great things to be able to come in and checking yearly cycles, other reasons to get in touch that aren't just responding to the fires. But let's talk about the fires a little bit too. So you go over some great list of red flags here, and this is, I think, again, like this is more of the, like, we call them fires, but this is the reactive day-to-day stuff. This is a little bit forward thinking. This is still being proactive. It's keeping an eye out for, as you mentioned, the bigger, what's going on in the bigger business issues, not just the smaller day-to-day tactical stuff.
Yeah.
Changing. Yeah. You want to walk through any of these, like any of these that have particular interest or resonance for you?
Well, I'm the one that M&A, for instance, if I hear a company's being bought or the CEO is changing, like I'm already looking to see if that CEO has a nephew in technology that's going to, ask for the password to all of the secret, secret server rooms or, whatever, the keys to the kingdom. That's a huge red flag, right? Like in the world of places you get blindsided is when a new owner leader comes on board and says, I have an IT person that I want to work with. So I think that's a huge one. And I think especially in the past 2 years, many businesses have pivoted. So listening for those pivots is important in two ways. One, it could be a churn, especially if they're pivoting towards someone that maybe markets toward that new-ish vertical. But the other piece would be, it could be a huge opportunity, right? Like, so tell me about this business plan. And you may see some things that you've learned. Remember, you have experience with lots of other businesses, right? That is one thing an MSP brings to the table that I think is extremely important. Is what that business owner doesn't have is insights into lots of other businesses, but you do. So to be able to come to the table and say, I don't have to know everything about your business. As a matter of fact, it's best that you know more than I do about your business. But let me tell you what I've seen other businesses, your size, your vertical, in this area, in this position, have done, right? The most successful ones, when they've transitioned, moved to the cloud, whatever it is, right? They've implemented this type of onboarding policy, training program, those types of things. That is where you can really show your expertise beyond button clicks of change management. And I think all of those red flags, I think Tom's like, yep, change management. That's the word. I'll let you go, Tom.
Well, Marnie, I really like what you had to say about leveraging the fact that as an MSP, you have this broad understanding of other businesses. And I'll tell you where I had some of those successes. When you typically think about it, like my thing was law firms. And I understand how law firms work and the software they used and what made them tick and how to make them better. So I could go to other law firms and say, hey, listen, this is what I know about law firms and how they do. But the same thing is, what worked well for law firms also worked well for consulting firms, also worked well for accounting firms.
Insurance
and
agents.
Learning that, you can take that knowledge and you can take it to other businesses, for example, where, let's say, the professionals make their money at a computer like a lawyer does. And you can go to other businesses like that and say, listen, I have this lesson. It's not a law firm, but you don't even have to say that. But let me tell you how we can improve your business processes. And when you improve a company's business process, that's the other part of customer success where you can really shine. And I'll tell you what, you improve their processes, they make more money, and you've got great customer service later. And on top of that, they will then refer you a ton of business. And you get this cross effect between different verticals that can really improve not only each of those clients, because you got this diverse experience, but it can also improve your business and their bottom line at the same time.
And I think this is really important. I trained a lot of customer success folks who did not have all of the experience that the folks that they were talking to, right? They had never been in a school system that was at the same level of the folks they were talking to. So it sounded inauthentic when they said, I have an idea for your business, right? Because they're thinking like, you've never been in my shoes. But to be able to say, I've seen a lot of people in your line of business. I've seen a lot of people I've worked with, some best practices I've seen. And it seems silly for me to give 4 words that make a difference, but the way that comes out of your mouth does make a difference. They hear best practices and they're like, oh, other people have done this, right? I have seen this successful with other folks. It also takes you out of, it doesn't become an argument with you, right? You're having this third party conversation between you and this imaginary other business that you're talking about. It just makes for a very easy, smooth conversation, I think.
That's great. I'm going to get into playbooks. So this is and we've got Ashley on board, which surprise, surprise, I want to get Ashley here. Ashley Cooper from Gradient. So great to see you.
Nice to see you. I'm actually repping the cyber drain today.
I was going to say yes.
I love it. I love it. And for those of you who don't know, Ashley has a long background in the channel. Previously at AVIC, active with MSP Geek. Ashley, I'm so happy to see that you were in the chat, and I was slacking you to get you on here. Thank you so much for doing it on the fly. I reached out to you not too long ago talking about things within Ninja because you have such great experience with doing this type of role, but a little bit differently, and building that out of AVIC, and now what you're doing with Gradient. And of course, it's different because you're doing things from a software, a SaaS, perspective with looking at product utilization and things like that. But yeah, just curious to hear your thoughts on MSPs kind of adopting this, and particularly around what we were just going to talk about, which is with your experience, how were you thinking about, once you've identified, okay, here we have an at-risk customer here. What's our playbook for recovery? What did that look like? And what was your kind of thought process in putting that together?
Yeah. Okay, that's a lot. First, I want to say that I was nodding my head a lot when I was listening before to what you were saying, Marnie. I was like, yep, yeah, that's exactly right. That's how we would do that in the software business. And like one of the things that's kind of like on the top of my mind lately is how like even like, like we're talking about leveraging what we know as vendors in the SaaS maturity of customer success and saying like, hey, there's a lot of stuff here that actually aligns with what you're trying to do. And obviously that's going to be because the underlying goal is like customer experience is king, right? But ultimately, like there's even a lot for us to learn on the vendor side as well, like from the more enterprise SaaS. And so I love the fact that we're kind of opening those lines of communication now. And we're kind of saying like, hey, this is something that we do to support you. This might actually be something that you would benefit from, right? Because the root of what you're actually trying to do is uncover the goals of your clients or your customers, right? And I'm a big subscriber. When I first got into customer success at AVIC, I was our first customer success manager, and I'd never heard of the role before. And I was like, isn't that kind of like account management? And I was like, I'm going to dive in and learn everything there is to know about it. And boy, was I wrong. But a lot of people think that way, right? A lot of people will think like, oh, this is sales. This is like, what's the difference? But it's like, you're delivering an ongoing service, and you need to be able to make sure that you're showing more than just that value that they come to you for, right? And so there's a lot of that clearing the plate that you need to do up front. That's like what to get to those goals. Like regardless of what they come to you for, they're going to have goals in their organization, and goals are different than objectives, right? Like objectives are going to be like the things they're trying to do in their business, but their goals are going to be time-based as well. And so like if you understand what those goals are, then I actually kind of shifted from agreeing with a high touch, low touch kind of tech touch methodology to more subscribing to like the Lincoln Murphy style of appropriate experience. So like if you understand what these people are looking for, and if you know, like, regardless of how much money they pay you, regardless of what their MRR is in your bucket, maybe they don't want to be communicated with every week or every month. Maybe they just maybe they're really mature and they want to come to you with stuff, and then you just kind of have those ongoing quarterly or whatever relationships. But maybe you'll find that in a lot of cases, at least for vendors as well, it's the smaller organizations that are seeking a lot of assistance from them, that want a lot of their time. And so if you are applying this, oh, you don't pay me enough, I'm not going to support you. It's like I've proven time and time again at AVIC that it was like, here's somebody that started small, but if you invest in them and if you understand what they're actually trying to accomplish and their goals, and here's how you can actually turn them into, this is what their potential was, right? Like just because they didn't trust you enough to come in at your full package doesn't mean that that's not what they're able to give you in the long run, right? And so that appropriate experience and understanding that. And I think in customer success, you can kind of go one of two ways. You can go down that success relationship route, or you can go down the, wow, look at all of the information that I could use if I had it at my disposal. And so if my systems were set up properly, and if I had the right tools funneling in the right information, look at all of these manual things that I used to do that I can now drive human experiences like through automation. Like, hey, congrats, I saw you were one of the MSPs listed on the CRN's top 500. Like they're just kind of like, wow, like you took time out of your day to do that. And it's like, those types of experiences matter. And so finding ways to like operationalize that type of stuff and drive humanistic behavior, regardless of what size your business is, are kind of like where I ended up on the customer success side, right? And it is a feedback loop, and it needs to have the entire organization in it from the top. You can't have a CEO that sees customer success as a revenue generation tool, right? You have to understand that customer success needs to be the core of your business, in terms of like the ultimate goals that you're driving for.
I told him in the green room that we used to have t-shirts that said, keep calm and let customer success handle it. Like kind of the connector for all of the pieces and parts, the English translator / connector. Yeah. And I very much agree with that.
Yeah. I mean, it seems like it's one of these things where as a concept, I think everyone really will nod their head quickly at it and get it. And it's really
just hard to disagree with customer success.
Exactly. But when it comes to operationalizing it, like that's where I think Marnie, everything that you've laid out in the book, and then Ashley, everything that you're doing too, just finding the ways to operationalize it. I think that's where the real magic happens. But Ashley, I want to come back to you in a second. But I know Marnie, you've got to run, and so before you run, I just want to give you a chance to say a little bit more about how folks can learn more. Of course, everyone should check out Lifecycle, and why are you talking about customer success? Well, it fits in exactly what you guys are trying to help people with. And of course, I mean, why don't you talk a little bit about the tool and what it does, especially with in relation to QBRs, but beyond that?
Oh, sure. So our initial product, the VCIO / QBR, if you stop Googling QBR, I'll stop calling it QBR, TBR, SBR. So Alex put in the chat, lifecycleinsights.sucks. So you can see how we suck for your competition. So we got some referrals on there, some references from some folks that are in this chat, as a matter of fact. That I think folks might enjoy. So our first goal was to automate the pieces of a business review that should be automated, and then give you quick insights into how to add the human element to it to truly be strategic. So we integrate with PSAs or documentation tool and deliver the reporting that you need, and then allow you to align it to risk assessments, et cetera. We are launching, like this weekend, the pricing page is going to look a little different because we're going to have 2 additional modules. So one, a light module called Air, that's going to be a warranty lookup tool that you could just automate warranty asset lifecycle management if you're interested in that, for an easy, quick, low, flat fee, just as sort of a commodity for folks. And the second piece is our customer success tool. So this really lets them get insights into their segments, into customer health, track those metrics, and stack alignments so you have insights into opportunities. So we're really quite excited about that. So thank you for letting me share, let me be on the call. I would love to talk about the books that I think other folks, in addition.
Well, I know. I put this. I made it sound like you were bragging about your own book for a minute, and I made sure that this was my note. But okay, so first of all, everybody should go get the book because, like I said, it's a very quick read, but a very very great one. And so I'm going to drop the link in here real quickly. Oh my God, that's a long link. I got to get rid of some of this junk on this. Hold on one second. There we go. That should work, hopefully. And then let me go back to what you're saying. Yes. So yeah, I love that you have some other books.
Yeah, I would love to give 3 props to some other folks. So raving fans. First, if you read the audio, if you listen to the audiobook, it's like Elmer Fudd telling you a story. So like that's a little hard to get used to, but 3 key concepts. It's a fable. So it's a very easy read. Getting Naked, which make sure you Google, that's by Patrick Lencioni, because you don't want to land on the wrong place. Some of your spam filters may kick you out on that one. So Getting Naked is about how to consult when you're not an expert in the industry itself. So to Tom's point, Tom is not a lawyer and does not play one on TV. Tom consulted for lawyers on the regular, right? Because he knew that consultative strategic approach to it. So I think that's a very powerful one. And the last one is about creating magic, which is a Disney-based. It's one of the VPs of customer success from Disney who really talks about like, how do you make overwhelming customer success? Somebody put in a ticket this week because someone on the team had done something well that just said they were a rock star, right? Like you're doing something if you get a ticket put in just because someone wanted to say a compliment to you. So how can you deliver those bite-sized pieces? So I'd like to leave with that. Hate to leave, but I booked myself on back-to-back webinars.
Well, you're very popular, and thank you so much for making the time. This is a great chat. I know everyone on the call, I'm sure appreciated it too. Thank you so much for taking the time, and we're going to see you soon. We're going to be doing some more fun stuff. I mean,
for sure.
We got some important dates coming up. So
yeah, we do.
Yeah. So I listed one thing here for our next live chat, but trust me when I say we've got some more fun things coming up very soon that Marnie and Alex and others will be a part of. So thank you, Marnie, again.
Thanks all.
All right. Take care.
Bye.
All right, guys. So we only have a couple minutes left too, but I want to make sure, Ashley, I do have another question for you. First of all, yeah, like while we're here, I will mention our next live chat for everybody. If folks have to jump right at the top of the hour, our next live chat is, oh my gosh, it's St. Patty's Day. I promise we're not going to go over the top with this, but we're going to have a little bit of fun with it. And we're going to talk about the best ways to de-risk your business. And I think we'll be having some great guests on for that and having some fun. So definitely check that out. You'll get more info as we get a little bit closer to it. But yeah, let me make this a little smaller here. And Ashley and Tom kind of maybe go around for like some final thoughts. But Ashley, one quick question I have to ask you. And I wanted to ask Marnie this too, but of course I blab too much. I see that a lot of times people mention sentiment as something that they're trying to track, right? And a whole challenge of this is coming up with right metrics and operationalize it. To do that, you're going to have to make things go into forms and be trackable and measurable. How do you measure sentiment? How do you do that in a way that's not just like the smiley buttons and not something that people are going to roll their eyes at?
That is a whole nother
That's
webinar.
a whole nother live chat.
Yeah. Sentiment can mean so many different things. It's like seemingly subjective, and it traditionally has been very subjective. There is a lot of work that's been done on how to properly measure that and like what types of metrics can be used. There's some confusion around some of those metrics too. Like for example, NPS is one that's more commonly known right now. I think that a lot of people see NPS and then they see all of the flaws with looking at it at a broad scale of all of the stuff that comes through. But really the value that you get from like a metric like NPS is your ability to like act on it at the moment, right? And then also to the point of segmentation, right? So you could, as an MSP, if you were using NPS to like measure over time, you might want to see what is the average sentiment of everybody who is on this package versus that package, right? And then if you're noticing that there's a difference between the two, then that's where you can really drill in and say, what is the difference in experiences that are happening between this one and what might be causing that. But like really being able to look at those lagging indicators from NPS and being able to act on things in a reactive motion. So like if somebody comes to you and says like, oh, like, I love your product, you're the amazing 10, right? Like that, the feedback loop of that should be to incorporate that into your marketing strategy to say, hey, can you advocate for us on this external website? But on the flip side of that, if they're detractors, then you'd want to be able to act on that right away. If it was product functionality from our perspective, right? If an MSP is using our tool, we want to know like upfront, oh, like we pissed you off somehow. It might have been maybe that they just didn't leave a comment and they stubbed their toe and then they got a pop-up and they were annoyed by it and they pressed 0, right? And then that's the thing that everybody looks at that number and says, well, it can't be perfect. But those are not the point. The point is the things that you can act on and the areas that you can have those interdiction techniques to drive that experience. But sentiment as a whole has a lot, right? Like it's got like really it needs to be a health score, and you need to figure out what that health score is and what goes into it. And there's going to be, in terms of customer success, your gut feel, right? And so a gut feel is going to go into that number, and then so will whatever metric you use. There's some great ones but it depends on what you're trying to like understand, right? So NPS is the first thing that I'd import, just because it can be used for so many different things. But then you'd want to look at like what a CES or a customer effort score is. And Google has a phenomenal framework. It's called the HEART framework. It's mainly meant for like UI type stuff. But if you look at like what the messages are, like there's like a whole thing around happiness, engagement, I forget what the A is, but then there's like your relationship, and then like how like the tasks, like what is the task effort that you're putting in to getting this done. It's pretty cool.
Nice. I'm going to drop a link into the chat here. That's a great one. I think we'll leave with this maybe. You mentioned having a health score, and maybe that kind of goes into a good point for us to wrap with, and that is just getting started. I can see how if you're measuring a health score and you're trying to put your thought into it, any advice in terms of perfect is the enemy of done here? Like do you need to spend a ton of time figuring out what the perfect health score is, or is it
V1,
better?
V1, V2, V3, define what you know, right? Like you're going to go back and forth on whether like somebody submitting a ticket is a good thing or a bad thing, right? And it's like, well, it's a good thing if they submit tickets, but at what point is it a bad thing, right? And like, so you're going to have all of these conversations while you're trying to figure it out. But the best way to do that is to learn while you're going, right? And so figure out the things that you do know, add those, define that health, and then as you go, you'll realize, hey, like this didn't align. What was the difference here? And then you'll notice something that's a trend, and you can add that, right? There's a lot of for a vendor, it's difficult because you have to like figure out like, well, what features are they clicking in my tool, and like, are they using it in the right way? And there's a lot to incorporate into a health score that way. But I think that when you're talking about relationship, you can kind of gut feel it to start, and then move on from there.
Nice. Okay, well, guys, I want to wrap. I do want to call out just one more time again. You'll have this doc. We got links here in the chat. Obviously, we'll have an email too. There's a couple of more things that we've put together. First of all, speaking of NPS and CSAT, which we didn't really talk about much, but we did a webinar, a couple of years ago now, but with Corey from SimpleSat. There's other tools, as Ashley mentioned in the chat. There's a lot of tools that do this kind of thing now. Maybe your PSA or your service desk tool, help desk tool, whatever you're using, could have this involved. Smileback, I think, is another one. Corey's great. This webinar is pretty interesting. We dig into how to utilize CSAT scores and do some things that Ashley's talking about in terms of building out some automations and opportunities for capitalizing with marketing. And then we got a quick customer scorecard, and this is maybe like us like living the that advice of like just have a V1, right? This is a very simple thing, but check it out. Like go download it. This is ungated. Just grab it, and maybe it'll get you thinking about what yours could look like. And then of course there's other great recommended reading from Marnie. And so with that, I'll drop that screen. Ashley, thank you so much for jumping on ad hoc. This is really appreciated.
Yeah, thanks for having me. It was fun.
Yeah. And Tom, thank you as always. Really looking forward to having everybody in a couple of weeks. In the meantime, take care, stay safe.
Thanks, everyone.
Yeah. And we'll talk to you later.